So you're about to meet with a Marine Corps recruiter and you don't necessarily know what the next steps are. Well, let's talk about it. Now, off the rip, I could say that I would generally categorize an applicant into two categories. Category number one, you have never thought about the military before and you were approached by a Marine Corps recruiter and convinced to come and meet with the recruiter to explore your opportunities. Category number two is you've already thought about the military in years leading up to you turning 17 so that you are now qualified, or 18, somewhere right around there. Generally, you fall into one of those two categories. So oftentimes you fall into the category where you've been planning on coming into the military for quite some time. You already know that this is what you want to do. You don't think you need to be sold by the recruiter or anything like that. But nonetheless, regardless of the category that you fall into, a good Marine Corps recruiter is going to sit you down and still have a full-blown interview with you to make sure that we lay down in concrete what are your expectations of the Marine Corps, and this is how the Marine Corps is going to help you reach those goals. That is what we call an interview. So now that we've got you into the office, whether you contacted the office or the Marine Corps recruiter came out and found you, you're on your way to the office to conduct that interview. And what the interview is going to look like is we're going to sit down with you. We're going to go over some of those screening questions. Have you broken bones in the past? Do you have allergies? Stuff like that. We're going to go through all those screening questions just to double down the fact that you are qualified, because a recruiter is taught to screen to disqualify the applicant, right? So we go through those screening questions. You're good, all right? Moving past that, the first thing that you should be doing is taking what's called the enlistment screening test. Now, to explain the enlistment screening test, it's basically a condensed version of the ASVAB, the Armed Services Vocational Aptitude and Battery Test. And what the ASVAB is you can kind of think about it like your SATs to make it into college. The ASVAB is the entrance exam to make it into the military. You gotta pass it in order to get in. Now, the ASVAB is a fairly long test, but the enlistment screening test is very condensed version of the ASVAB, and you have about 30 minutes to take that test. It shouldn't take you that long, but if you pass the enlistment screening test, now we know that you're physically qualified because we asked you those screening questions, morally qualified because part of those screening questions we're asking you if you've been in trouble with the law, and we know that you're mentally qualified because you just passed the enlistment screening test. Next, we're moving on to the actual interview where you're asking questions to the recruiter and the recruiter's asking questions to you. Now, what this interview generally looks like is kind of like a rapport building stage where as you're asking questions to the recruiter's answering and asking more questions. They're typically open-ended questions to get you to speak more. We as the recruiter, we're trying to learn more about you so that we can kind of angle the direction of the interview to make sure we're giving you the best information about the Marine Corps to fit your goals, your needs, and your motivators. Make sense? Now, once we've done that building rapport stage, we're gonna transition into laying out what's called benefit tags. They're tags that have tangible and intangible traits. We ask you to pick your top three tags, and there is no right or wrong answers. They're just the tags that are most important to you, and we're gonna go through each one of those tags. Let's just say that the tag you pick is titled travel, and we're gonna explain to you, hey, if traveling is important to you, this is how the Marine Corps can help you to do that. If traveling is one of your goals, this is how the Marine Corps can help you achieve that goal, basically. Now that we've gone through your top three benefit tags, we've answered every question that you have. The next step that recruiter is going to do, or should do if they're a good recruiter, is ask you straight up, are you ready to be a United States Marine? And then they stop. They wait for you to answer. It might become a kind of awkward because you're sitting there thinking like, that's a hard question. You're just gonna ask me if I'm ready to become a United States Marine, and the recruiter's just gonna be sitting there waiting for you to answer, because the first person who breaks loses, right? And it should not be the recruiter. And it's not like, so what do you think? Like, do you think that this is something that you could see yourself doing? No, it should be, are you ready to be a United States Marine? They should ask you that question like that. At least that's how we're taught, right? Now you can answer that however you want, but if you say no, they're gonna kind of dig back into it and see like, okay, well, why no? Like, let's get back into it. Oh, you had this other question that we didn't even touch on. Let's answer that question. Or if you say maybe, well, why maybe? If you say yes, boom, now we're moving on to the next steps. Realistically, Are you going to feel pressured to say yes? Of course you're going to feel pressured to say yes. Do you have to say yes? Of course not. You know, that is completely 100% your decision. If you said to me, no, I'm not ready to be a Marine, I'm going to ask you some more questions. I'm going to give you some more information, but I'm going to respect your answer at the same time. So what we should do as recruiters is just kind of ask you like, hey man, statistically life situations kind of change every 30, 60, 90 days. You mind if I give you a phone call in about a month and see, hey, you know, how you doing? Is this something you might see yourself doing at this point? No. Hey, okay. I'm not trying to blow you up or anything like that. How about I give you a call in 3 months from now? And that's kind of how it should go. And who knows, maybe your life circumstances have changed and now you're ready to become a Marine. If you said that, yes, I am ready to become a Marine, how it works is we at this point need to collect some documentation from you. If you're 18 or older, at that point, we're going to let you know that we need to get your birth certificate, your social security card, and your high school diploma. We need those 3 vital documents to send them to MEPS, which is the Military Entrance Processing Station, which is where you would go to take that ASVAB test that I talked about earlier. And you would also take a full-blown physical while you're there. And there we are going to make sure, because we've only asked you some screening questions to this point, but now you're going to see an actual MEPS doctor, and they're going to make sure that, again, you're mentally, morally, and physically qualified to be in the military. So to even get to MEPS, we need those 3 vital documents, and we're going to have to start filling out some paperwork. Does that paperwork have to be filled out that day on the spot? No, it doesn't. But realistically, the recruiter is going to try to have that documentation filled out as soon as possible. So if like, yeah, you said, yes, I do want to be a Marine, I'm going to grab that paperwork off of my shelf and I'm going to start going through that paperwork with you, unless of course you had other obligations that you needed to go and attend. And maybe you didn't expect for our interview to last 2.5 hours. So you need to go, but I will definitely set up a time and a date for us to follow up probably tomorrow. But yeah, so you're going to fill out some paperwork and it's going to be a whole bunch of medical questions and stuff like that. You're going to bring in your 3 vital documents. And the recruiter is going to start building that enlistment package, and you are going to get projected to go to MEPS to take your ASVAB and get your physical. Now, this part is particularly important. A lot of people that I've seen in the past go to MEPS and they don't realize that what they're doing when they're there is enlisting. When you go to MEPS, typically, right, there are some onesie-twosie scenarios, but typically, if you're going to MEPS and if you pass the physical and you pass the ASVAB, you are going to swear in to the Marine Corps Delayed Entry Program, which means you are at that point enlisted. You're not a Marine, but you have enlisted into the Marine Corps, at which point you now have a date to go to boot camp. From now until that date to go to boot camp, your job is to train and become physically and mentally ready for the rigors of Marine Corps recruit training. And you are a United States Marine Corps poolee. Now, as a poolee, you might have 3 months until you go to boot camp. You might have 6 months until you go to boot camp, however far out that date is. If you want to go to boot camp sooner, you can certainly talk to your recruiter, and that recruiter will arrange for that to happen, I'm sure. But if you need to go to boot camp later, there's going to be some questions like, why do you need to go later? Like, have you not been training? Whatever, because the recruiter is trying to prepare you for boot camp. But it's really up to you. Like, are you putting in that work? So again, if that date for you to go to boot camp is 3 months down the road, you should be working with your recruiter, identifying whatever your flaws are. If you're not great at running, if you need to lose some weight, if you need to do more pull-ups, the recruiter should be working with you to help you reach those goals and have a high success rate when you go off to Marine Corps Recruit Depot, Parris Island, or MCRD, San Diego, for Marine Corps recruit training. Now that you're in boot camp, you are attending recruit training for a total of 13 weeks. You're in boot camp for 3 months. Marine Corps boot camp is the longest and the hardest boot camp of any other military service. And that's fine. We like that. but you need to make sure that you are mentally and physically prepared to be there. So if you're doing something like this, just know that as a grown man or a grown woman, you are making the decision to go down there. So take that seriously, because this is your future that we're talking about. Now that you've completed boot camp, next step is you're coming home. You typically are coming home for 10 days of boot leave. You come home and you relax, you show off your uniform, you show off your new Eagle, Globe, and Anchor to your family, your friends, and your loved ones, right? After the 10 days is over, heading back off to training, and the next step in the accession pipeline of the Marine Corps is you're going off to MCT, Marine Combat Training, which the last time I checked is currently 21 days long, and Marine Combat Training is just that. You went through boot camp to learn the basics of becoming a Marine. You go to Marine Combat Training to learn the tactics of our weapons handling. You're gonna throw a grenade, you're gonna fire some big guns, you're gonna go and sleep in tents and all of that stuff for about 3 weeks. Boom, you finish Marine Combat Training. Next step in the accession pipeline, you're going to your job school. Whatever job you chose when you signed up, let's just say that it was supply for an example, you're going off to Camp Johnson, North Carolina to go to job school. Now, if it's a different job, you might be going somewhere else. There's different schools all over the country. So when you complete MCT, you go off to wherever your job school is located and you complete the job. Now, job school, depending on the difficulty of the job, can range anywhere from as short as 2 weeks to months and maybe even a year. I'm not exactly sure how long the longest school is, but it can be from weeks all the way up to months. I was an admin Marine, and I believe my schoolhouse was 8 weeks long, so I was there for 2 months. Now, the last step of the accession pipeline is graduating that job school, or your MOS, Military Occupational Specialty. And now that you've graduated, you're heading off to the Fleet Marine Force. That is where your first duty station is. So you could get stationed anywhere. Typically, you get a choice, and that choice is limited to East Coast, West Coast, or overseas. So if you said you wanted to go to Camp Lejeune, you can't necessarily narrow it down so far. You typically are just gonna say, well, I wanna be close to Camp Lejeune, so I'm gonna choose the East Coast, and you could end up with that spot, or you could end up maybe in South Carolina. That's just kind of the way the cookie crumbles on this one. You're choosing East Coast, West Coast, or overseas. But you make it out to your first permanent duty station, and you're checking into your unit, and at that point, you are a full-fledged Fleet Marine. Now, I wanted to make this video because I haven't seen any video on YouTube that goes in depth on the entire accession pipeline, from literally meeting with the recruiter all the way to making it to the Fleet Marine Force. Now, obviously, this isn't like an hour-long video, so if you guys have some specific questions on maybe something on MCT or maybe something in boot camp, drop those comments down below, and I'll be sure to crank out another video and I can go more in depth on a specific thing. But I wanted to make sure that I got a video out kind of talking about what it looks like from meeting the recruiter to making it to your first duty station. So hey guys, I'm Dom with the After Actions Podcast. If you like the video, hit the subscribe button for me and turn that notification bell on. If you got any questions, comments, or concerns, drop them down low. Looking forward to cranking out another video and hearing from you guys. Until next time on the After Actions Podcast.